So good morning, good morning. Here we are, one more week. After this, I think we've only got 3 weeks to go in this particular series. Today, I'm talking about the purpose of the soul, and this came from a suggestion giving me the two topics together, but I thought I'd put them together rather than make them separate, and we'll see where it actually goes. I've made myself some notes as usual, just to kind of figure out, because the first thing I really want you to know is this. This is not the first planet or dimension that the soul comes to. And I'll tell you why I know that. One New Year, it was over Christmas holidays, I was reading a book written by a man from Korea who is being known as a real master healer. And during that book, somewhere in that book, he mentioned that he would go back and see all the different planets and things right back to the beginning when the soul first came into being. And I thought, well, if he can do that, I think I can do that. So from that, what I began to do was phone up some friends and also some regular clients and said, look, I really want to see how I can do this, because I was already in my transformation work looking back, and even it started years ago, actually, looking back as to how a person was when they first came into this life. So I wanted to expand it a little bit more, because I was already looking at 1 or even 2 lives back, places where, when I said not really lives, but places where people had been. So actually practicing, what I began to find was that I would follow the trail of the soul through different planets, through different dimensions, and then they always ended up at the same place when they first came into being. So I began to recognize that this place, and the only way I can explain it is like a huge ball of almost, it's not white, it's not opalescence, it's hard to explain, but it's like a big white round circle of which I never see it fully. I only see maybe 1/3 of it. It is really big. And out of it comes these small drops, which I can equate in our terms as drops of mother's milk, kind of thing, like a drop. Now, these drops become our souls. So I don't know how often it drops a drop, but it seems like quite a lot come on out of this, and consistently. And then the journey begins. Now, there has been a book written about this, but with the information discovered, I think it's Dr. Newton has done this. I think that's the name. I forgot to research it, sorry. And he began to describe some things through hypnotherapy with his patients, or maybe I should say clients, that he would take back to the beginning, and they would explain some things very similar to what I was discovering, but not exactly the same. It was very similar, though, as that these little beings came out. Now, from my experience, I was expecting, as being a person in planet Earth and knowing that we are here to sort of come at oneness with the loving force, I was expecting to find this love, and I didn't find it. What I found instead was in a most incredible beingness, just an aliveness of being. And this beingness is like when we come, and then I also ran into some people that I call the watchers, very tall people that look the same. I couldn't distinguish one from the other. And they say, where right there, they seem to take in these little souls that come out. And to me, it was almost like a production line. And I remember in one journey that I did, which I always found really fascinating, there was this little soul that had just come out. And one watcher said to the other, I think I've got a special one here. And it was like he put it up on a shelf. Like, that's the only way I can explain it. And he went on about doing something. Then he went back and sort of said, where did that one I put over there? Have you seen it? Well, I was following that one, and I'd followed it back, and it had an incredible journey. And then what it got curious. It was like it came around, looked around, and said, "Oh, I wonder what this is." So it got curious, so it went off to explore. Anyway, they found it, and then they put it on a very special program, very different from most of us, which kind of set free, you might say, to wander around the universe to figure out what we want to figure out. Anyway, this guy went through a very interesting element of learning. And that's the other thing to realize, is that there are many different kinds of planets. I think I've visited all sorts of kinds. And I have I've written something down here, so excuse me for looking down and reading, about the different things that we have. What I found in particular through this one person's going back, that there are teaching places. Now, again, these watches, as I call them, also seem to have a part to play at different times and places. But the planets weren't really dimensions. They were like planets. Some were teaching about sacred geometry, some were about mathematics, some were about healing techniques. And of course, there is the space travel. Most souls that I take back, or follow, I should say, that I don't take them back, I follow the journey back, have a time period in space travel. And I have come to learn quite a bit about how space travel works. Couldn't tell you about it scientifically, to be honest. I couldn't tell you at all. But I've been on many different kinds of spaceships because of this. I've been on little ones. I've been on big ones. I feel like I've gone to the edge of the universe. It reminded me of a Star Trek program, and we're looking out into black. I've seen a lot of different things. Now, the one interesting thing was one lady that I worked with on this, when I came to the space, it's almost like I expect to sort of show up this space time period. And I said, "Oh, this is interesting. You're working as a ground crew. You're not on a spaceship." And she said, "Yeah, I don't like the idea of traveling in space. I can see that would be me. I can see that that's how I would be, because I don't particularly want to be traveling around space." Now, I also want to put a little adjunct in here, is that what I have found with some of the elements that I've read for too, is that sometimes the spaceships get stranded here for various reasons, and the people then have to acclimatize into becoming humans. And that's a little bit of a different side story, but it is definitely an interesting thing to do. So when we're talking about the purpose of the soul, what is this purpose? Here we are created, here we are, then, where do we go and what do we do? What I've begun to recognize was that we're really just here to experience. And we experience many different forms. Now, one of my early journeys back, I was working with a friend of mine, and she was she ended up on this planet. And I'll tell you, I've seen this planet several times, and we think Earth is brutal with our wars and our fighting. This is really gruesome. It's even more primitive. And every time I see it, in my inner being cringes, because I was like, "Oh no, not again." And anyway, this was the very first time I ran into the actual watches, because I hadn't really got all the way back to the beginning part yet, because it was one of my first early ones I did. Anyway, all of a sudden, my friend's soul was kind of taken away from where she was. And I remember saying, "It feels like you've been burned by acid or something." And she was taken into a dimension which was very green, to heal her, because what she had experienced wasn't very pleasant at all. And she couldn't handle the brutality, and her sensitivity couldn't handle the brutality of this particular place. And that's the only time I honestly have ever run into, and I have just a small spectrum of doing these readings, is that the watchers interfered, that the watchers actually interfered. They came in and they scooped her out of that life, or that period of time, and where she was, and put her in this healing, and where she was healed from all this acid burning, from the horrificness of this planet, and then came on and eventually came to Earth. So why do we come to Earth? Now, another thing that I began to believe over time was that this was an emotional planet. And as this is an emotional planet, it's not easy for a lot of people to assimilate. So I'm going to step back a little bit and talk about how do we get here. What I have found, and that's all I can talk about, is what I have found in this kind of work. It's like the energy that you come in with. I have found that people come in angry that they're coming here. I have found them coming in as groups. I have found that they come in here with a mission to do something. So this is some of the things that I found over the years was I first ran into that people came here that was sent here as a penalty. You're going to be put here for so many million, sometimes a long, long time. That spies were sent to figure this place out because they would send something out to figure out this planet, and then the people weren't coming back. So there was like, how do we get this information about what's going on in this place? And we're only a little planet in a huge, big galaxy of many universes. But anyway, it's a very different one because our planet is has an aliveness that is emotional. I also found that people decide to come here for various reasons. But very often, when I'm looking at how the person is coming into this life, well, come into the planet, sorry, not the life, coming into the planet, and what I'm looking for is their enthusiasm or excitement about coming to Earth. Because if you don't have that, what tends to happen, that if you're coming in anger because you're being sent here, or you're coming in mad, or recently I had someone who arrived that had no idea where they were coming at all. They were just sort of like, what am I doing here? Have no idea. And I have actually run into that before. It's like they just, what am I doing here? Well, what you're doing here is to figure out this emotionality that we have here. So if you're looking at other planets, the planets tend to be mental. They tend to think. It tends to be very much about this is what we're doing. And so, yes, a lot of them do have power issues, like people, a certain sect of people or a certain group of people wanting power over the others. That's also in there as well, which is why the rebels, you might say the rebels, get sent here. Because they haven't complied to what they're supposed to be there. So that's when they come in often with a lot of anger and frustration because they have no choice. And now they're stuck here. Because that's what emotionality does. So what is the purpose of this planet? The purpose of this planet is to tune in and understand the love force that the planet actually has. And that's one thing I've found consistently is the planet welcomes us. Historically, there have been times when the planet kind of rebels, but I'm not going to get into that today. But it does rebel, and the souls of can be freed. And at the same point, it's like most of us, when we're here, we have to work through what we call lives. It can be past lives, future lives, and the life we're in now, in order to resolve the feelings of what we're having. Now, years ago, I began to do drawings of the soul. Now, I'm not an artist, believe me, but I do these impressions which show me the soul from when, and I usually take it from when they're born, unless it really shows there's something that really happened before in like a neutral position, to now, to see how and what and where they're actually growing and going to. And in that growth element, the soul often we have what I call soul scars, where we block, where we stop, and then part of us grows around that, just like the nut in the tree. And so our souls actually often, and I hear, oh, your soul is perfect. Well, no, I haven't found that. I have found one close to as well. So let's say two that have been come to see me, and their souls have been pretty intact. And they have not really got soul issues. Most of us have soul issues. Blocks, hurts, pains that have dug deep. Sometimes these are lifetime after lifetime after lifetime we create. we create them, and it makes it difficult. So I know I feel like I'm jumping a little bit here, but I want us to now go back when we're coming into, the soul is coming into earth, and let's say you're deciding to come here because it's just time to go experience something different. A lot of people do this. They're at a place, and what I find very often is they get bored. It's like looking around, like, okay, what can I do now? Just like a kid, well, I'm bored with this. What can I get into? So what can I go experience now? So they end up deciding to come into earth. And so they come in quite happy, experiment and everything, but then earth is emotional, and you're not used to handling emotions. You don't know what to do with them. You make often very incorrect decisions or non-appropriate decisions for the higher and the best for yourself. And then look out, all things turn. So why the lives that you have become important, because you are consistently working with decisions that you've made about things, not only yourself, but life generally, how it all fits, how it all works. So the element then is that you are wanting to come in to understand feelings. Most of us don't want to do that. Feelings can be very painful. There's a lot of pain and there's a lot of hurt. So what do we tend to do is we suppress that. Unfortunately, that doesn't work well here, because then it builds up more, you might say, a situation where you can have experiences again and again and again and again until you wake up. There's one thing about being here or being in a life, is that this is not the end. I have really come, especially in the last few years, to recognize that the soul is totally infinite, and that it is not just bound to this planet. If it can move beyond the confines of this planet, if it can handle and deal with all feelings easily, not always easy to do. Even though I know this, there are times when I get emotionally caught up myself with things. Big breath, come back and look at it, understand it, become aware of it, and then be able to move further from there. So there is this whole journey of recognizing that in this life, which is really important because it gives you an opportunity to explore your self-love, to tune into the lovingness that is here, and just to feel that connection, not only to the planet, but to all the humanity that is around, and recognize, yeah, we are all very much the same. We're all on a journey. Some journeys don't feel good. Some periods of our lives don't feel good. And yet, if we absolutely know that that love is there for us, we're able to work with it quite a bit. Excuse me, I have a little itch on my nose. I'm going to have to scratch that. Now, I thought I was going to have trouble with my drippy nose because of the cold that I've had, a little bit of a cold I had. So I'm just going to wipe my nose. Might as well take a personal moment here. So I just want to look at my notes for a moment. I wrote here, a lot has been written as to why we are in this life. I believe it is, as I have said, to understand your emotions and responses to life. And there definitely seems to be some purpose behind our lives, which astrologists and numerologists advise us of. I myself, in my consultations, talk about the reason why. And there's a simple way sometimes, because people want to know what's my purpose? I often hear that. What am I doing here? So I have a very easy way to kind of get an idea, and I'm just going to run through this. So it's basically you add up your birthday, and it gives you a broad outline as to how you react to this life. Doesn't mean that it's set in stone. And there's all sorts of add-ons too, which I often go into, is like what supports that, what doesn't support that, what's contrary, etc. But basically it goes like this. You use the numbers 1 to 9. Number 1, this is the adventurer, wants to see what's over the hill, so to speak, and likes new things. It gets bored very quickly, to be honest. Ones are very much like the rolling stone that gathers no moss. It's like, okay, I understand this, now what? Oh, there's kind of that, if you're into astrology, a little bit like the Aries energy of that. Like, what's now? Bring it on. Now, the number 2 birth path is the communicator. It likes balance and is often a teacher or a demonstrator or something instructing others how to do things. That seems to be very much part of the number 2 life. And think of it, excuse me, as 2. If you got 1, okay, but if you got 2, you got to balance that. Number 3 is the creative life. I find the number 3 really important. We would not be here as humans without the sperm, the egg, and your soul. The 3, which is creative. And if you look at the flower of life, etc., you find that that kind of expresses it really well too. But because the 3 birth path is creative, it needs to be self-expressing. And if it's not, it can be depressive. And I find a lot of 3s will run into depression or other elements of that, and that they need to be, and I always say when I see a 3, if you're feeling down, ask, what am I not expressing? What am I not doing that brings me joy? What brings me happiness? Because that's what the 3 is all about, is creative, but that's self-expressing. And I say, people say, oh, but I'm not creative. And I'll say, do you garden? Do you bake? Do you sew? Those are all creative expressions, and many, many other ways, you know, like so. And then they'll go, oh yeah, I knit, or yes, I crochet, or I make these things for people, and so there's self-expression. How do we express ourselves? So it's very broad, but it's really, but if they're not self-expressing, depression can follow. Number 4s. They're the hard workers of the group. They are the ones that work hard. It's a physical number. They like nice things. They like things that they can touch and feel. They like being like the physicality of everything, actually. Yeah, they may have other numbers around them or other elements that's not as strong, but basically they are the workers. And if you ever explore a group that works in your community probably would not exist without number 4 birth paths. They're the ones that volunteer for being on a committee or get in there and help and get in there and do all the things. Just need 4s. Number 5. Number 5 is very much like my 5 fingers going in 5 different directions. They like starting things. It's another energy. By the way, 1, 3, and 5 are the main energy numbers. But 5s like to start things. They don't know how to say no. I always say when I'm talking to 5s, especially if they have a lot of 5s, your main priority is to learn how to say no. And I have a technique of how to teach people to say no, because often the older people, like when people are in their 50s and 60s, often have learned how to say no through necessity, but the younger ones don't know anything about it. And it's like their plate gets so full, they don't know what to do. They get overwhelmed, and they also can go into depression because of the overwhelmingness of everything. So it's learning how to say no, because they want to do everything. And unfortunately, you can't often do that. And sometimes they're the rescuers of the world. They're the ones that are out there trying to rescue people. You know what I mean? Help them, forget about themselves. What about me? No, forget that. About other people mainly. So their priorities, I always say, know your priorities and work with your priorities, because that's important. Number 6, they are the healers of our world. They like to heal. Help others, often as social workers, nurses, or anything else that does something to support and heal others. Often I find they come in and they have especially if I have where we're doing a soul impression drawing, all is green. And I say, oh, do you do any healing work? No. Do you get itchy palms? Oh yeah, I get lots of itchy palms. Well, that's the healing energy wanting out. So we have a little talk about that as to how they can learn, where they can go to learn how to utilize that force so they're not getting itchy palms all the time. Number 7s, they're spiritual seekers. They're time out, actually. They want to understand the inner workings of self. Usually they need some time every day to themselves to kind of sort through things, how they went, how they worked. I had a friend that introduced me to this years and years and years ago. where she would have a bath at the end of every day. And she had young kids, we had young kids, and we would visit a lot because we were the travelers. So we would visit, but we all knew, her family, my family, you do not interrupt her in bath time. That was her time, and what she did was she did all her introspection at that point. So, and that's when you ask a 7 that, oh, you don't need a little bit of time for yourself every day, they just smile and nod. Yes, they do. Number 8. Number 8, if you read any book on numerology, I kind of feel they've missed the boat on this a lot, but that's my personal thought. I think the purpose here is to balance their philosophy, their basic beliefs into the physical world. It's not an easy task, but if they get a philosophy that works, and that's the key, having a philosophy that works, they can do very well in the physical world. In fact, they do very well, and that's why they talk about, it's like this is the power number. This is the power ability. Yes, if it's balanced. If you are all material or if you're all spiritual, it's not balanced and it will not work. And actually, it's really interesting because when people come to see me and I write, they have an 8 number somewhere. It can show up in many places. I really look as to how, I don't think about it, but I look back, how did I draw that 8? Did I make the top too big? Did I make the top open? Is the bottom little or bigger? Because that will tell me how balanced the person actually is. So to me, it's a balanced number, an 8 when you look at it. It's the infinity sign. So if you can put those 2 components together, yes, you have power. But you don't have power over, you have power with yourself, and know how to work with that. So it works really well. Then number 9, this is the one that I actually years and years ago, when I was first starting out as a reader, I actually went into meditation on this to get the answer of a 9 birth path, because what the books were telling me was not kind of feeling right. And what I'll tell you the answer that I got when I went in and I said, what's going on with this 9 birth path? People are coming to me constantly asking for what is my purpose, and each one of them will have a 9 birth path. And this is the answer I got. This is a payback life. This is a life where they can go and create whatever they want to create. Now, sounds great, right? But it has a downside. And the downside is this, that if you, hang on, got to back up a minute. The downside is this, because you create by how you think. 9s are often, as I explained to them, they're like a boat without a rudder. I have a rudder in my life. I have a birth path. So if I go off on some tangent, the rudder gears my life back on track. Sometimes it's been a job to get me back on track, but it gears it. 9s don't have that. So whatever they're thinking, the universe, you could say, is saying, oh, this is what they want. So they create it. What ends up happening in a lot of cases, they create chaos because they don't know what they want, which is the main thing they have to figure out. And they can change it, yes, but not to change it too quickly. Because even though they create quickly and easily, so I always suggest to my 9 birth paths that you can think big, because you can create, but you got to stay focused on what it is you're wanting to create, to give it time. Even though their time span is shorter than what, say, I create, they can create. So basically, they have an open book. They can choose. And unfortunately, a lot of them choose chaos because they don't know. They create by how they think, feel, and respond. Basic 3 tenets I teach about creating. So those are basically some of the ways you can find out what's your purpose in this life, but not in the bigger picture of the soul. The soul's purpose is in this planet is to come to terms with all emotions. There's no judgment. I think I wrote something about there. Okay. Therefore, purpose truly is what you want to make it. Do you live a life of kindness? Do you feel the love of this planet as it is there for you? You could call it universal love. Do you have empathy for others? Do you accept people and their issues, or do you judge them? Do you accept yourself, love yourself, and do the best you can to be the best person you can be? Do you recognize there is so much more about this planet, people, and the universe in which we are just such a small part of that we don't understand and only can come to understand as much as we endeavor to do so? For some reason in my life, from when I was a child, very young actually, maybe because of all the traumas that I did go through, I don't know. But I wanted to know about God. I wanted to know how life worked. I wanted to, I guess, be of service as well, because I feel I love to teach. So all my consultations tend to be a teaching experience as well. But it was like I wasn't content with someone saying, do this. I wanted to find out what this meant. How did this work? And often I found what they were saying to me didn't work. Many times I would take classes or read books, I'd do this, blah, blah, blah. And then I'd find it didn't work. How come it doesn't work? If something works, it needs to work if you're doing what they say or the steps of what they say. And slowly and surely over the years, a forming began to take place that led me step by step by step, sometimes through not very nice personal stuff, but the need to know how this planet works, the need to surrender and let go of my will of how I wanted things to be, how I wanted them to show up, and often didn't, until finally just saying and listening. And am I perfect? Definitely not. Definitely not. I am truly a human being with my own desires and reactions and things like that. But underneath it all, I understand the basic principles. I understand how this planet works. And because I've had the privilege through clients being willing to let me look at their soul journey back to the beginning, I've had the experience of seeing other worlds. I have seen so many different kinds of planets, some beautiful. And I haven't talked too much about dimensions because it's not just planets. The dimensions, the healing dimensions, the fairyland dimension, where basically it's just so peaceful and beautiful and playful. I remember one dimension, it was like there was nothing but rainbows that you could do art in the air. I mean, there's some beautiful, beautiful, beautiful places that are not planets. We're not in form, but our souls get to express itself in such a beautiful, lovely way. There is just so much that one can learn and come to understand when we let go of this smallness, you might say, that this world is all there is. This world is just a step on our journey. We've had many things before we got here. We got here and had many more experiences. And when we finally leave this earth vibration, when we finally leave it, we will go on to different dimensions, to other planets. And it becomes such a wonderful, wonderful sense. I'm hoping that through this talk, that the purpose of the soul comes clear. It's to experience, to come to understand, to be more aware of the bigger picture and not the little picture. It is to expand in the awareness that we are. I call it isness. It just is. Our beingness and isness are two words I myself use often to explain, learn about it being, that you are a being that's magnificent, that everything just is. What you choose to do with the isness is your choice, which sets up your purpose and moves on and on and on. But the more you can forgive yourself for where you may judge, where you may hold on to things, the better for you and the world. The more we can love, we can feel the love, be the love, know the love, it adds. Everything adds. So we want to be there. So I trust you have a good week. I'll be back here same time next week when we will have another topic. And oh, by the way, I want to thank those that emailed me. This topic came from another person, not me. It didn't come out of my mind at all. I had to think about it, actually, how I was going to do it. So if you have a topic, if you have a question, just email me, norma.cowie@gmail.com, or check out the website, normacowie.com. And I look forward to being back here same time next week. Thank you. Have a good one.